Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm June Rawl, IPDA's Director. I'm so glad you could join us today as we focus on implementing and strengthening an ESL classroom through an integrated education and training model. Throughout the webinar, we will refer to this as an IET model. Today's focus is on how we can use the IET model to help improve ESOL instruction. Using some guidance from the ELP Standards. Later, we'll also see how one ESL program in Tampa, the CARIBE Refugee program, is taking the IET model and ESOL to a whole new level of implementation. Remember, the goal of IET is to combine ESOL adult basic education and workforce training working towards gainful employment. Our facilitator today is no stranger to any of us. It's Ronald Cruz, the coordinator for the CARIBE Refugee program at Hillsborough County Public School and a statewide trainer for IPDA. Also on the webinar with us is Phil Anderson, Florida Department of Education ESOL Program Specialist. But before Ron, can you go to the next slide? But before we get started, please note that your attendee microphones are muted. I hope you interact with us today via the Q&A section on your screen. We really want to hear from you and how you provide literacy activities concurrently and contextually with workforce preparation and training for your students. Type in any question or comment you may have anytime throughout the webinar. We'll be answering them throughout. As in the past, today's webinar is being recorded. Look for it in the archives on the IPDA website. The recorded webinar will be available within 48 hours. Thanks again for your participation and assistance in continuing to advance the cause of adult education throughout Florida. We applaud your work, and we're really here to support you in any way that we can. Ron, I'm going to now turn it over to you as you introduce today's objective. For facilitating this today.
Thank you, June. Thank you for that nice introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. I really appreciate you tuning in and again spending precious time in your afternoon to learn a little bit more about how we do things in the ESOL program here in the CARIBE Refugee program, and also learn a little bit more about the IET. So let me go over the agendas for today. First of all, I want to go over some background information about, what started this IET, and then go into like, okay, what is this IET that I kept mentioning to you? I want to give you a little bit of information on what that is, what are the essential components of that program, and then tie it back to our standards, the college and career readiness standards and the English language proficiency standards. After that, we're going to look at how the ELP standards narrates how it looks like in practice, how to integrate the English language proficiency standards in an IET class, and also move on to using the curriculum frameworks in developing lessons. So we're going to have, some ideas on, putting together lessons using some of the ideas, in this webinar. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about how we do things here in the CARIBE Refugee program, some of the innovative initiatives that we have started that have gained a lot of momentum with our students. And then a few questions for you to click and answer, and then we're going to move on. All right, so let's start off with what started this? What's driving IET? What's driving the changes in our curriculum? What's driving the college and career readiness standards and the English language proficiency standards? Where it all started on the release of the WIOA. WIOA stands for Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. It was released back in 2015, and its goal is to target those low-income and lower-skilled youth and adults to achieve economic success. And how do we do that? Well, we already have some really tried and tested programs in adult education and workforce development and post-secondary education that already do that. But what this law it provides is empowering these three organizations or these three institutions of adult education, workforce development, and post-secondary education in order to become more successful and accelerate the students' achievement of their economic success. Now, with that said, within the development of implementations for WIOA, the integrated education and training, which we now are going to refer to as the IET throughout this webinar, it spawned from that. So let's talk about IET. So IET, just like I said, stands for Integrated Education and Training. It's a key strategy in career pathways. You know, there's these IET programs are very goal-oriented. They involve a lot of practical information that really prepares students for post-secondary education and work. So, so that's kind of like IET in a nutshell for you. But there are many adult education providers that have discovered the power of this IET program. They developed multiple partnerships and implemented strategies to model these programs. And I'm just going to enumerate some of the things that that were developed or initiated from this. Colleges, technical colleges, adult education institutions, school districts have implemented bridge programs. Some of them have implemented workplace learning programs, pre-apprenticeship programs, English literacy or integrated English literacy and civics education programs, correction education programs, post-secondary education programs, and out-of-school youth programs are just one of the many model programs that implements IET. So that's just, and then I want to give you a little bit more information on IET. Just like what June said during her introduction, integrated education training combines adult education, workforce preparation, and workforce training into one, creating the most rigorous and most relevant type of instruction for our students. What do we focus on? We focus on improving those reading, writing, mathematics, and English proficiency skills because, yes, ESOL students are part of this initiative. And in addition to improving the reading, writing, mathematics, and English proficiency of these students, teachers must use occupationally relevant instructional materials. So meaning instructional materials that would already help them become more successful in going into more post-secondary adult vocational programs, part-time vocational programs, and all other workforce preparation or workforce training programs. We cannot talk about integrated education and training without talking about the standards. The standards lay the groundwork as to what are the essential skills and content that we need to teach our students when they are in these programs. And the guidance, we get that guidance from the college and career readiness standards. And I think we've developed so many workshops and also so many webinars focusing on this, on the college and career readiness. So that's kind of like re-emphasizing how important these standards are. In addition to that, we also have the curriculum frameworks. That's, you know, as you may already know, or if some of you do not know yet, that the adult ESOL curriculum frameworks effective July 2018 is now posted on the FDOE website. So all you got to do is go into that FDOE website and go into 1819 curriculum frameworks, and then that's where you're going to be able to find the new adult ESOL curriculum frameworks. So you can start looking at it and browsing through it and seeing what has changed, because there's a lot of changes in this curriculum frameworks. In addition to that, I also added a copy of the adult ESOL curriculum frameworks in the webinar materials. So I'll show you how to access that later on. So now, why focus on, or why ESOL? Why IET and ESOL? Why such a greater focus on integrating English language learning to IET, or using the IET model to strengthen your ESOL programs? Well, this is the reason why. Well, English language learners make up more than 44% of adult education students in all federally funded systems. And then in Florida in particular, there's 55% of adult education students are ESOL students, or considered as English language learners. So may it be post-secondary adult vocational workforce preparation programs or adult basic education programs, they have English language learners that are sitting in those classrooms. In addition to that, English language learners is a more particular group of students that require particular attention in terms of instruction. And why? Because they bring so much diversity in your classroom, not only in terms of ethnicity, which country they come from, what languages they speak, their cultural backgrounds. In addition to that, the level of education of our English language learners is a wide variety. There are some students that that come to us with master's and doctor's degree in their native country, and they're just sitting in your classroom to learn the English language. But there are some that has close to zero, experience in formal education, such as refugees that are in the camps, such as immigrants that just came into the United States with no prior educational background. They also have varying language needs. There are certain English language learners that require that want to go to college or take the GED and then go into college. There are English language learners that already have a job and would like to improve, their salary or improve their position in their current job, and needs a little bit more language assistance in order to make that leap. There are also some students that are just there. We have the elderly students that are not going to go to work. These are students that are not going to take advantage of any other, post-secondary programs. They're just there to learn English so that they can communicate with their relatives and young children and grandchildren and things like that. So there are a variety of language needs. There are many, many reasons that we have to juggle around as teachers, based on the number of ELL students that we have in class. And in addition to that, last but not the least, is the age. As you may know, in adult education, we can have as old as 18 years old, and as young as 18-year-olds, and as old as, I think in one of my classes, I had one that is 58, 59 years old. So, there's many different ages, that come into your classroom, and you all have to teach them, in one class. So how do you juggle these things? So, having an English language learner in your classroom is not an easy task. So now, where do we get the guidance to help those students that are English language learners? Well, the guidance that we can get it from the English language proficiency standards. And we did several webinars on the English language proficiency standards. We talked about why this is important and how is this increasing the level of rigor and educational equity for our English language learners. So it's really a lot. The English language proficiency standard really aligns with the college and career readiness standards, and these two standards align with the goals of integrated education and training, and also WIOA. So let me just go ahead and just talk about IET in action. So if you have your English language proficiency standards report, or this book that you're looking at, the red book that you're looking at right now on your screens, if you have a copy of that, there are 4 sections in that book that talks about how the English language proficiency standard is applied into practice. And they use several different scenarios. One is in an IET class, another one is in an ESOL class, another one is an adult basic education class, and so on and so forth. So what I'm going to do next is highlight that section or that example in the English Language Proficiency Standards report that focuses on integration of the ELP standards in an IET classroom. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down to you. Just so you know, if you want a copy of the English Language Proficiency Standards report, an electronic copy is posted on the materials section of this webinar. And I'm going to show you how to access that towards the end of this webinar. So let's look. On page 73 of that report is where you can find what it looks like in practice. We are not going to spend our time reading this. You can read this on your own time. But what I'm going to do is to just briefly outline this strategy that was highlighted in this section of the book, so that you can kind of see, we can kind of walk ourselves through the planning stages of this teacher. And so we're going to refer to this teacher as Amani. Okay, Amani is an IET teacher, and in particular, it's an IET program preparing them for CNA, or Certified Nursing Assisting. Okay, so in this particular example, the teacher Amani's topic for the day was taking vital signs. And she identified the language focus. What she really wants to get out of this is to focus on the communication. And in particular, she wants to focus on how students make requests of their patients, explain what they're doing, and build rapport. Because we all know these three things are very important for any certified nursing assistant. It's just safe for safety. A second is to build a good, strong relationship through quality customer service. So we want our CNAs out there to perform their task with fidelity and observe every aspect of safety, making requests of patients, explaining what they're doing to the patient so the patient know exactly how they're supposed to act or how they're supposed to position themselves, and they can prepare on what's to come at every stage of taking the vital signs. The teacher really wants to focus on two basic modalities, which is the listening and the speaking. So the teacher Amani looked into the college and career readiness standards for guidance. And in particular, she looked into the listening and speaking anchor standards. And I'm just going to read it off to you. This standard states, prepare for and participate effectively in a range of conversation and collaborations with diverse partners, building on others' ideas and expressing their own clearly and persuasively. So that's the standard. So after reading the standards, Amani looked at how can she, because the standards are explained very broad. So now we have a broad idea of, how we can, teach these skills that she wants to focus on in the lesson. Now she wants a more direct or more targeted approach to the college and career readiness standards. So she turned into the English language proficiency standards for some guidance for those students that are English language learners in that class. So I bring back to your attention the correlations page. The correlations page of the English language proficiency standards is found on page 75 of the report. So in this case, we've already noted that Amani is going to focus on the speaking and listening strand. And in particular, this standard one, anchor standard one of the speaking and listening college and career readiness standard. Because from that point on, we need to find out the matching English language proficiency standard for that, or the correlating English language proficiency standard. And as we look at this chart, we are looking at ELP standard 2. ELP standard 2 states participate in oral exchanges of information, ideas, and analyses in various social contexts, responding to peer or audience, and in this case, the patient, and comments and questions. So now if we want more detail as to the breakdown of Standard 2, ELP Standard 2, we now go into view, you can look either view 1 or view 2 of the ELP standard. And so this one gives you the view 1. Okay, so view 1 is, there it is, the CCR standard that we are targeting for this lesson is right at the bottom, boxed in green. Okay, so now, so it's still there when you look at view 1. And in addition to that, we have the same standard on the correlations page is also written in here. But what I want you to pay attention to is this section where you have all the individual levels. Okay, so the individual levels, you use that by gauging, okay, what level of English proficiency, do my students have, or where are they in this spectrum of skills? And it's really up to you based on the students that you have. So this breaks it down to a more granular approach to the standard. So if you take, for example, standard ELP Standard 2 at a level 3, it breaks it down into 1, participate in conversations, discussions, and written exchanges about familiar topics, and then building on ideas of others, and then express his or her own ideas, and then ask and answer relevant questions. So it really breaks it down to granular pieces that you can practice and target one at a time as a teacher. So now that we know the ELP standard, the college and career readiness standard that aligns with what we're trying to accomplish, then Amani turned into now the lesson planning stage. So this just gives you a quick review at the top, what we're trying to focus on. We are on the unit on taking vital signs. We want to focus on making requests of their patients, explain what they're doing, and build rapport with the patient. And in particular, it's going to be in the speaking and listening component. And then I, again, listed down the college and career readiness standards. So I want to keep my eye on the prize. I always write the CCR standard in my lesson plan so that I can always make sure that I'm hitting those standards very hard. And then as you read through what it looks like in practice, as you read through Amani's approach, these are the lesson activities that she outlined based on what she read from the English language proficiency standard. So what she did was a brainstorm icebreaker question that they may ask nursing home residents. So, just breaking the ice. Hey, how are you? Good morning. How have you been? Or if they already know the patient from a previous consultation, maybe ask, okay, so how's your wife, or how's your daughter? Things like that. Have you heard the news today? Something like that. Just to break the ice, put the patient, at ease, and get the patient more relaxed while you take the vital signs, which is very important when you're taking vital signs. You can't have a tense patient when you're doing that. And then second, discuss topics to avoid when asking icebreaker questions. So yes, for our ELL students, they don't necessarily have the, enough cultural background and experience here in America to actually discern which types of topics you want to avoid on an icebreaker. So this is a really good topic to discuss with your students, and I think students will have a lot of good information from this discussion, because then that's when you bring in, all of the various cultural experiences of your students, because some of them may already be practicing nurses or practicing doctors in their native country, and they're just here to become certified as a certified nursing assistant. So they bring all of that wealth of knowledge into the conversation. In addition to that, another activity that Amani indicated on that document is to practice a specific language needed to describe what they're doing to the patient. So this is when Amani will focus on exactly the vocabulary, what types of vocabulary, what types of words we need to use to signal the patient of different things that they have to do when they're making requests of patients or when they're explaining to the patient what they're trying to do. And then towards the end, I kind of like just highlighted here that how she's going to assess that in these 3 lesson activities is she wants to gauge the quantity of speech produced and the articulation when speaking. So she wants her students in her class to articulate clearly and pick the right vocabulary when making requests, explaining what they're doing, or when they're just building rapport with their patients. So really solid lesson here. Even though her focus is not really on ESOL, her focus shifted on the communication component of this particular job field, which is certified nursing assistant. So, based on that particular story, we're going to spend a few minutes just doing a quick Q&A here. So I wanted to know, so now that you've seen how an IET program looks like and how it's outlined in the English language proficiency standards, I want to ask you, how do we prepare our students to enter these types of programs? If these programs don't already exist in our individual technical colleges or school districts, or community colleges, how can we help our students in that, enter that program? Or how can we use the IET model to add a little bit more rigor into our ESOL classroom, helping them prepare for, achieving those college and career readiness standards? So I'd like to hear what you think, so use the Q&A tab in your taskbar. Click on it, a window will pop up, type in your question or type in your response if you have any, to respond to this question, or if you have any questions, you can type your question there as well. So that's, okay. So I'm going to be tuning into your questions, so don't keep those questions coming or keep your responses coming. And what I'm going to do is go over and share those ideas that you share with everybody in this webinar, and and kind of talk about it with everybody who's participating here. Okay, so moving on. Okay. So now what we're going to do is, what if we are an ESOL classroom? Okay, so in our case, most of the people that are participating in the webinar are either administrators of ESOL programs or instructors of ESOL or ESOL teachers, or maybe adult basic education teachers. So where do we start? In our case, because we are, ESOL teachers, we start with the ELP standard first. So it's kind of like the reverse of what Amani did in her approach. So for us, we're going to focus on a particular ELP standard. So let's just say, okay, let's pick one random one. And an ELL can construct meaning from oral presentation and literary and informational text through appropriate level listening, reading, and viewing. So, so now that we've selected our ELP standard, now we're going to do the reverse direction in the correlations page. So again, this is on page 75 of the English Language Proficiency Standard report that is also included in the materials for this webinar. So we start with ELP Standard 1, which is the one that I just read to you, constructing meaning from oral presentations, and then we go into our chart. Okay, and as you go across, we see some numbers underneath the language arts and literacy standards under reading. So we've got some reading standards that correlate with that ELP standard. Okay, and then we also have this number right here, which is the number 2, which stands for the second standard for the CCR standard for speaking and listening. So we've got multiple things. So it's really up to you where you want to focus on. You want to shift your focus on the reading first and do the listening after. Some teachers like integrating both reading and listening together in a particular activity or a lesson. That's really up to you. but it would be noteworthy for you to look at what are the reading standards 1, 2, 3, and 7 under the CCR standards, and what is speaking and listening standard 2 in the CCR English Language Arts standards. So you need to look at the college and career readiness standards. So for your convenience, I just listed them all for you. So under the reading standards, under the CCR reading standards, these are the 3 standards that we are hitting on, or we are correlated to when we're looking at ELP Standard 1. Read closely to determine what text says explicitly to make logical inferences from it. Cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. Determine central ideas or themes of a text and analyze their development. Summarize the key supporting details and ideas. And last but not the least, analyze how and why individuals, events, and ideas develop and interact over the course of a text. Later on, after we've developed this lesson, what I want you to do is we're going to go back to this slide and review this slide and say, did we hit these anchor standards in reading based on the activities that we designed? And this one is this speaking and listening standard, anchor 2, that we are hitting when we teach off of standard 1 out of the English language proficiency standard. CCR listening anchor 2, speaking and listening anchor 2 states, integrate and evaluate information presented in diverse media and formats, including visually, quantitatively, and orally. So there's a lot of information that I have to integrate in the development of my lesson. As much as you would want to hit all of these things, I would caution you to not do that. I want you to hit as many as you can without sacrificing the engagement level of your students. You want to gauge how much your students can absorb before moving into the planning stages of your lesson. So just think about that. And sometimes what drives me into which standards I hit is really the topic. It's like, oh, well, what's the topic? Where do we get the topics to discuss and to apply these standards upon? Well, fortunately, okay, we have the curriculum frameworks for adult ESOL. So from that, if you have taken a look at the curriculum frameworks for adult ESOL, the one that is most recently just released, and that's the one that's effective July 2018, there is a section there called Life and Work Competencies. The life and work competencies are towards the end of the curriculum frameworks for adult ESOL. So that's there for you to look at, okay? And it arranges all of the different major topics or themes, as I may call it, so that I can pick and choose from these themes, okay, which one would be the appropriate one that I wanted to target. And in this case, let's just say, for example, I would pick community. Well, under community, if you look at the life and work competencies under community, there's many, many competencies that are listed underneath that one. So they tell you what about the community you should be discussing, what about the community should be targeting. Should you be targeting using the ELP standards and the college and career readiness standards? So it lists them all for you. I'm not going to read them all, but what I did was I selected these 3. Because just by looking at these 3 life and work competencies, I'm already thinking of a good lesson that I can do with my students. Looking at maps, relating it to travel, and it already has some technology in it. Perfect. We are in Florida, so we talk about hurricanes a lot, especially we're about to enter the hurricane season. So it's really good to start talking about this one. And then for me, we call Tampa as the lightning capital of the world. I don't know how many lightning hit our area during severe weather, but this is just perfect, and then locate and utilize services of agencies that provide emergency help. Because I don't think a lot of the immigrant students or my ESOL students know what to do in case of an emergency. And sometimes for my students, it's a matter of life and death for them, because they don't, I want them to be able to know what services are accessible, in times of emergency or severe weather. So kind of like I'm already thinking about, okay, this would shape like a really good lesson to put together. So so let's go ahead and do that. Before I do that, I want to just turn back into some of the questions and comments that you may have. There is one comment here or question. When you are developing IET courses, what time frame do you expect the students to master the skills for both the CCR standard and the workplace skills? It seems this could be a semester-long course. And yes, the answer here is actually going to be given in the slides that I'm going to cover towards the end and how we do it. It pretty much does take an entire semester, but you can also what I've seen in other, these are non-IET programs, but are adopting kind of like an IET-ish model, is that they're chunking their months according to various workplace training programs. So for example, okay, on the first month, we're going to focus on the construction industry, and then on the second month we're going to focus on the health industry, and then and so on and so forth. You can do it like that because it's rarely you're going to have the same group of students with the same career goals in the same classroom at the same time. So what I found, some teachers of ESOL, they're doing something very similar to this. So it's not very strenuous in terms of their time. But yes, IET programs sometimes last even longer than a semester, because some of these workforce preparation or workforce training programs require so many hours. Let's say 900 hours for certified nursing assistants. Well, when you're doing 900 hours and you're probably maybe meeting only 3 hours per day, so that's going to span a long amount of time beyond a 6-month semester. Another question here are, what NRS or functioning level do students need to be at to enter into various IET programs? The answer is it depends. So there are various requirements for it depends on the particular IET program. So I'm going to talk about that and certain little requirements that we have and certain things that we do here in Tampa. So so that's for you to watch out as we go through this webinar. So thank you for those questions. So let's go back to our classroom lesson plan. Okay, so we've got the college and career readiness standards down. We started off with an ELP standard. And now we know what context we're going to teach it on using the life and work competencies from the adult ESOL curriculum frameworks. So now we're ready to write our lesson. So, okay, so I want to identify, okay, well, this is going to be my topic, local community resources during severe weather conditions. What do I want to focus on? I want my students to be able to, I actually just used and lifted this off directly from the from the life and work competencies. Read, watch, or listen to weather information in various media and create and present a list of things to do in case of severe weather and agencies that provide emergency help. So these are the 3 things that I'm going to accomplish. And this, if you want to know, like, I'm designing this lesson for a 3-hour ESOL class. Okay, so just think about that in terms of how much information and how many activities I'm incorporating. Each activity may not last an hour. Like more time should be invested into on the application stages where we create and present things, and less time on the rote part of this lesson, like looking at the vocabulary, identifying various weather conditions and things like that. So the time is very fluid. Also, it also depends on the level of the students that you have in that class. So if you want to use this same method or this exact lesson if you want to. And then, there's another one that I added here, is to create an evacuation route from their home neighborhood to a nearby place of shelter. So they need to find out how to get from there, in case of emergency. So at least they have it on their phone, or it's saved, or it's bookmarked under their Google Maps or something like that. And then modalities that I'm going to focus on is all 4 modalities. Reading, we're going to be writing, we're going to be speaking and listening in this lesson. All right, so maybe I'm going to do some of these activities. We're going to do a severe weather forecast viewing. So I'm going to look on YouTube, or actually tune into the local weather station. They always do some quick forecasts at different times of the day. So we're going to do that. We're going to practice viewing and listening. And then what I want them to do as they listen through the forecast is to summarize in the information. And I want them to focus on key details. Is it going to rain? When is it going to? What time of the day is it going to rain? Do we have to make emergency preparations? So categories of storms and things like that. So I want them to pay attention to certain details with time, with date, with graphs and charts. I want them to look at all of that when we're viewing the weather forecast. Then after that, maybe I'll do some technology in the lesson. I want my students to use the internet to research common things to do in case of severe weather in Florida. And there is a ton of resources developed by various community agencies and community resource agencies that provide help and information in case of emergency. So I want them to look at that, list down some common things to do, maybe prepare a hurricane kit, or map out your evacuation route, or know the closest hurricane shelter, in case of that emergency. So those are the types of things I want my students to research. And of course I will have like a guiding worksheet that go along with that. And then after they do their research, I want my students to do a presentation of what they've gathered, from research, which includes the evacuation route. So that's really part of my rubric, is real for them to be able to map out that evacuation route from their neighborhood to a place of shelter. So once we finish, so I feel like when I finish this activity, I feel like I'm helping my students become more prepared for these emergencies. And so they would already know, it will already be saved on their phone, regardless of which part of town they live. And then, of course, they're going to present this information to class. Depending on time and the amount of time my students would need to do this lesson activity, the presentation may come the day after. So I might require my students to just do a little bit of homework, put together the presentation or polish the presentation, and then come back to class the next day ready to present the information to the entire class. So where did I get all of those crazy ideas, right? Well, there's other things that I want you to focus on when you're looking at the adult ESOL curriculum frameworks. What I'm getting those things is like, why did I include, why did I use YouTube or the local weather internet forecast? Why did I incorporate research on the internet? Well, because I want to incorporate the digital literacy standards outlined in the adult ESOL curriculum frameworks. And in this particular case, I'm implementing in this particular lesson DL1, DL2, and DL3. Okay, so in addition to that, there's another area of focus in this lesson, because I really want them to focus on the IET, because that's really the topic for our webinar for today, is the integrating those workforce training and workforce preparation skills. Well, there's a section on your curriculum frameworks that identifies what are the critical components of workforce preparation. And in this particular case, in this particular lesson that I just narrated to you, these are the 3 things that I'm really focusing on: is utilizing resources. Okay, so organize, plan, allocate resources such as time. Do you have enough money to even prepare a hurricane kit? What type of things should be in there? Or if you want to narrow it down to the essentials of the hurricane kit, so there's many things that they can do to make the hurricane kit cost effective, because for some people that can get really expensive. And then also want my students to use information, organize, interpret information, not only from the weather forecast that we will be watching, but also getting information from the internet, in order to prepare for natural disaster. And then last is understanding system. And in this particular case, I want them to understand the social system in order, how do you access social services before, during, and after an emergency situation. So that's really one part of, and these three things that they will learn in this lesson, they can use in their job, because in their job, in their preparation for their future job, they need to be able to know what resources are available to them for them to complete their task. They must be able to use and follow the information that is provided to them. And they must be able to understand mechanical systems, societal systems in order to perform and be good at their job. So, and in addition to that, not only am I incorporating those workforce preparation activities, I'm also doing an extra leg up that I'm gonna go, and when I wrap up the lesson, I'm gonna talk about, what are the different types of jobs that really kick into play during an emergency situation or during a natural disaster? Well, one of the most popular and ones that we see all around us when these emergencies happen are the emergency medical technician. So I'm going to talk about that and spend a few minutes talking about what's the emergency medical technician. Is there a program in a local or nearby technical college that offers this program? When does it start? What are the requirements? That's something that I will probably research ahead of time so that I can give that information to my students. I'm going to talk about what skills are important in the EMT. Just to help my students think: are you the right person for the job? Is this the right person for you based on the skills that you have? How important is language skills or communication skills in this job? How critical is it? Because it could save or kill another person. So another thing is I can talk about how students can become an EMT. Just like I said, I probably give them a fee sheet from a local community college or from a local technical college, and then connect them to the right counselor if they wanted to inquire what types of tests are going to be taken, how they're going to get certified, and how much it would cost them. And then I want to discuss other fields of work in an emergency, such as policemen and firemen and things like that, and do the same thing. But I'll have a heavier focus with the EMT, just because you only have time to focus on one, especially when you're teaching only for 3 hours. And then we're going to talk about discussion of other available CTE programs that align to one of these job roles during an emergency. So really, I want to do and go the extra mile and really support, if there is one, an IET program in my school district. Okay, so before I move on there, I'm going to go in and talk about some of the Q&A questions that's been asked. Okay, so there's a question here. There are materials that are available in this webinar, and you just asked this question at the perfect time. So that's what I'm going to do next. So I'm going to exit out of the presentation and take you to the IPDAY website. Okay, so a lot of you are asking, how do I access this magnificent materials that you kept mentioning? Well, if you go into the Florida IPDAY website, www.floridaipday.org, click on, from the landing page, click on your ESOL channel, and then from the ESOL channel, click on the Webinars tab. And under the Webinars tab, you will see this is the title of the webinar, Implementing IET in ESL Classrooms. So just click on that. And then when you click on that, okay, where you see presentation documents in the bottom left corner in light green, you have the PDF document of the PowerPoint slides, and then also the workbook. So I'm going to show you the workbook in a minute, but let me just go ahead and tell you what else is in here. You can download, I attach here the ELP Standards for Adult Education, the College and Career Readiness Standards for Adult Education reports. Both of the reports are available to you. And also I talked about the Adult ESOL Curriculum Frameworks that's effective July 1st, 2018 is also in here. So all you got to do is click it and it automatically downloads to your computer. Now, I really wanted to draw your attention to this workbook. So when you click on the workbook, this PDF format will populate just like this. So this is it. This will populate. It's got a table of contents, so you can easily click to the page. So you see, okay, by looking at the table of contents, you can click on the item and it will take you to the page where that item is. And it talks about everything that we did in this webinar is outlined in here. And the information in here, it's got some reflection questions to just deepen your understanding. It's got some questions about the IET class with Amani that we just did. I attached the correspondences chart in here, additional questions, and oh, wow, I added a lesson plan template. Just keep in mind that this template is, it's not the end all or end result of your planning. This is to get you organized with everything you need for the, plan. I also included here the life and work competency section of our curriculum frameworks, additional reflection question and activities towards the end, and also I have a scavenger hunt here. So you might want to try that out, get the best and the most out of this webinar, so that you can get the best learning out of this webinar and really implement this program with fidelity. Now, I'm going to talk about and spend the last minutes of this webinar talking about the CARIBE Refugee Program. We are a program that services refugees in our area, and these are our students and our teacher. Our teacher's name is Luis Cardenas, and this is kind of like our mission: prepare them for the workforce, prepare them, make them more self-sufficient, provide quality instruction, have our adult ESOL students become leaders. We want to be exemplars in innovation and in career and workforce preparation. And these are just the services that we provide. But some of the things that we've been doing is we partnered with the hospitality industry here in Tampa, the Hilton Hotels and Resorts, specifically the Embassy Suites, and then the Marriott, which is the Courtyard. And there are 4 hotels within the same area that says, well, we have a lot of our housekeeping staff, custodial and engineering staff that really do not interact with customers, but that we want to interact with customers, but they really can't speak English. They have very, very limited English. It's very even difficult for managers to communicate with them certain tasks or certain needs of customers and other staff. So this partnership started from that. We got wind of it through Lutheran Services and also Career Source, which recommended us for their need. And then we started planning. We partnered with them. We created a non-financial contract with them. We started a school, and that school is being held in one of the conference rooms of Embassy Suites in Brandon. And so at a particular time of the day, and in this case from 3:30 to 5 o'clock. So it's an hour and a half per day, 2 days a week. That's all they can afford in terms of time. And what the hotel offered, or the hotel management offered, is to pay for their ESOL tuition or compensate them for their time. And that's really done one-on-one individually with what each student prefer. And then we listed down all of the expectations. So the expectations are, well, of course, we're going to need, we have to have classroom space on these days that we're going to say we're going to meet the students and train them. We need to have classroom access to presentation materials. We need to have access to your printer because we cannot haul a printer into the hotel. So we have to be able to access their equipment in order for the classroom to start. We want the room to be already set up in classroom setting and things like that. So we write that into a contract. And then, just like I said, some students are paid and some students are not getting paid, but their tuition is paid. So one or the two, they have the option in this case. Another program that we partnered with is the manufacturing industry in Largo, Florida. And in this case is select staffing, and the manufacturing industry is called HIT Promotions. And we focus on, again, communication skills. And they came to us and say, well, our employees, we do not speak English, and it's very hard for us because we're updating our equipment and we're getting new manuals and we're having to retrain and reteach them, but it's very difficult. It's taking us a long time because they don't have English proficiency. And a lot of students are getting burned out in the job because they don't have opportunities for promotion because of their language. So we wanted to focus on that. We partnered with them the same way we partnered with Embassy Suites. We sat down with the industry itself. We sat down with select staffing and hit promotion, and we took their employee manual. We took their orientation materials. We took all of the manuals that they have to learn in operating equipment and used those materials to teach ESOL to our students. So really a very powerful and transformative experience. Is very popular with the industry, and we're, every now and then we're getting some companies calling us and say, hey, can we model that program? We heard you're doing this program. And but what we do is, if there is already a school close by to a particular industry, we recommend them to go to that school, because we don't want to open too many classes and then very few students in each one. So that's that one. We also partner with health industries like Pioneer Medical Foundation and also the Children's Board here in Hillsborough County, and do a CPR training. So we get all of our students moving from level 4 and 5 moving onwards are CPR and first aid certified, which we know is going to be a necessary certification in order to complete certain programs such as EMT, such as certified nursing assisting. These are things that are required of them anyway. So all of our students, through our partnership with the health industry, are being certified in CPR and first aid. Of course, there is an English test at the end and a physical test at the end of this. So everything is done in English. So we do a lot of preparation time leading up to the date when these professionals are coming in to do the final training. But we're really laying the groundwork for our students to be ready for their certification tests on CPR and first aid. And then, of course, this will not be possible without the magnificent group of professionals that work with me in the CARIBE refugee program. See how happy we are there. These are the people that make this work possible. And through coordination and teamwork, that's how we were able to start these very innovative programs. And we have more programs to talk about. I also want to talk about those programs that are true IET programs. In Hillsborough County, we do have an IET program where the student is concurrently enrolled in an ESOL class and also a phlebotomy class. So they're enrolled in both ESOL and a phlebotomy class, and they both earn credits in both classes. So it's concurrent enrollment in these two programs, and then as they move through. We also have a program here in Hillsborough County that is tied up between the same thing, adult basic education, and then childcare. Childcare operations is also another one that we are doing here. So again, just like I said, they go into so many hours of ESOL or adult basic education or even GED, and then they go into the career preparation program. And in one of the cases that I know of, there's one program that is a co-teach model. So you have both the ESOL ABE teacher or the adult educator and the health professional in the same room. And in particular, I'm talking about this phlebotomy class that I just mentioned to you. This phlebotomy class is a co-teach model. So there is built-in time where both teachers are in the same classroom assisting and working together towards the program. So that's it for that. I know there are a lot of questions, but unfortunately we are out of time. But there is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to archive all of your questions that you have, and I'm going to respond to you directly through email. So, because just for the purposes of time, so it's just 1 hour is just not enough to talk about all these magnificent things. So, what we wanted to do next is we want your feedback, and it's really important to us. So before we close this webinar, we would like to get 1 more minute of your time to answer 3 short questions. So these 3 short questions are popping up on your screen right now. I'd like for you to go ahead and give us your feedback or responses by clicking on the button. And then in a minute, I'm going to close the survey. Okay, so the poll is now closed. Thank you so much for your feedback. We hope you will be able to join us on our next webinar. And it's also an ESOL focused webinar. On May 9th, our topic is preparing English learners for post-secondary success. So thank you very much for tuning into this webinar. We hope you have a great rest of the day, and we'll see you again on our next webinar. Thank you.